Hello, y'all, and welcome. My name is Pedro Ceniceros, and I'll be today's gracious host. And joining us today is none other than Miss Natalia Sanchez.
Thank you so much for letting me join your podcast. I'm so excited to be here.
We appreciate you being here, Natalia, and we've worked together in the past before, and it's always a pleasure to work with you. And before we begin today's topic, I did want to ask, would you mind telling the audience a little bit more about yourself?
Yes. So my name is Nathalia Sanchez. I am gonna be 21, so I'm 20 right now, sadly. But I'm an architecture student. I've been working in the Humanities Collaborative for 2 years now. This is my last year, unfortunately. Yeah, because I'm going to Texas Tech, so I can't be a part of the Humanities Collaborative. But yeah, it's just something about me, and I love I love the color blue. I love reading. To be honest, I really do like reading. I always say I don't, but once I get into books, I really enjoy all the books that I learn. And also when I was working with you and with Diana, like she taught me a lot of books. So I was very excited to be part of this and to read another book that I had never read before.
I do want to thank you for sharing, Natalia. Um, well, without further ado, you are watching Long Story Short, a 2024-2025 EPCC/UTEP Humanities Collaborative Project. In today's episode, we'll be discussing Julia Alvarez's How the Garcia Girls Lost Their Accents. And would you mind giving us a little bit of an overview of this text, like what it's about?
Yes, it's from what I understood, it's about a Dominican Republic family, but it's based more on the perspective, but also like first person perspective of Yolanda, one of the four girls. And it's Sophia, Yolanda, Carla, and Sandy. So it's the four girls, and it just talks about like it's like the chronological order but backwards. So it goes from when they're all adults with kids to when they're like little kids with their families and all of that. And it's just about their struggles about being Latino in the US, but also their struggles with the Dominican Republic and like their struggles there and how they came here and their struggles just being Latinos in a country that doesn't really support Latinos and their struggles with racism, their struggles with their own identity. And I think it's a very powerful yet very easy book to read. So I think that's why I really liked it. Because I feel like reading books about stuff like that is very, very hard. But I feel like when they put it in an easy way to read it, and sometimes they have like funny stories or very dramatic stories, I feel like it makes it easier. Because I read another book for my English class this semester, and it was about just Mexican identities and all of that, and it just made it easier when you read like funny stories. So I feel like that was kind of what I really liked about the book.
I'm glad that you mentioned a lot of points that I actually wanted to discuss with you today in your intro there. But starting with the narrative style, you did mention that it starts in a reverse chronological order. Do you believe that this narrative style helped you digest the story better?
I feel like, yeah, because when I read the end, I understood why she did it that way. Because if she would have done it from the very beginning to like when they're adults, I feel like you wouldn't have the same impact and understand where they came from. Because I feel like the reason why she did it was to have a better understanding how they got to that point. Because it starts off with how Yolanda, she's divorced and she has a bunch of issues with herself and her own like career. And then you have Sandy who has a lot of issues with her father. And then you have Carla, or I think it was Sandy who just got out of the hospital.
I believe so. I think she was in a mental institution.
And then Carla's like a doctor psychologist.
Psychiatrist, I think?
Mhm.
See, see.
And I feel like understanding how they got to that point is a very deep thing. And I feel like going back to how and why, I feel like that's a better understanding than just starting from the beginning and just be like, oh, well, they were born and then they had the struggles and then that's how they got there. But I feel like starting from how they got here to why they got there, I feel like that's a better understanding and I feel like that's why she wanted it to be that way.
I do agree. The narrative itself really does deconstruct the story as it's going along, and it's a really good like it's a really good book to discuss because it pretty much dissects itself for the audience. Um, Another thing you did mention was that Miss Yolanda, she was the main character because the book does open with her and it does end with her. Uh, how do you think her identity specifically shifts throughout the book based on that?
I feel like at the at the at the beginning of the book, it starts with her going back to the Dominican Republic and looking for guavas, and then she has some struggles because she sees two men, and she's scared because it's like at the end of the day and it's dark and you see two men with a knife. Well, it's gonna be scary, and I feel like it captures the first moment where she, in a way, loses her accent, like her Latino accent, and identifies as American rather than a Latino. And I feel like it kind of was her own safe haven being American because it, in a way, protected her just in case if anything happened. Like she would acted dumb and while hearing whatever they were saying. And I feel like that was a very big moment. And then it goes to like the second part where it's when she's like in college and she's dealing with like her own identity and her own like um, relationships and with other men and how it's dealing. And I feel like from when I read that part, I knew that she was, in my opinion, I feel like she's very strong, even though she had her own like mental breakdown at a moment. But I feel like she's very strong in the second part, especially because she does stand up to her own beliefs with the guy because the guy that she was with wanted to do stuff with her, like sexually, and she understood that she did want to, but only with her own beliefs and her own boundaries. And when he overstepped those boundaries, I feel like she understood that that's not what she wanted. And she said no both times, like 5 years later when he came back. And I feel like that's very powerful for a woman. And I feel like it's a very big part. And I feel like that's why there's a lot to do with that part in that whole second part. You just dive deep into her own college experiences, and then you go to like the first part where she's just a little kid and she's dealing with also like dealing with her own career identity because her mom wanted to push so much the poetry even though she's very good at it, but she understood that she has her own boundaries. And I feel like that's set throughout the entire book about her with her ex-husband, with her ex-boyfriend, with her mom. She does set a lot of boundaries for herself, and I feel like that's very powerful for a woman because even in the book it says like in the Dominican Republic with Sofia, she has like her boyfriend, and her boyfriend says, well, women don't have those type of rights, even though they have rights, but they don't have like the type of rights to set boundaries. But I feel like even with her, she said, well, I have boundaries and I'm gonna set them. And I feel like that's very big throughout the book.
That's a really good way of putting it because we really do see that when she's a little girl in the Dominican Republic, she really does not have any autonomy per se. She's like pretty much at the whims of her cousin Mundine, who is like her pair, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
But like whatever he has that she wants, like he basically manipulates her into like, how can I say it, like into like
Showing.
into showing like sexually explicit
Mm-hmm.
things about her, even though they're both kids. But as a bigger, adult, I would say like she's able to say no, like that's not what I want. I think directly because of that experience with her cousin and the very violation of her boundaries as a young child. Um, I'm really glad that you put it that way because I wouldn't have not had the words to express it that way. Earlier, you also did mention that because of the humorous stories in the book, it was really easy to digest. Uh, in your opinion, how does humor function in an immigrant society?
Well, my mom is, well, my grandparents are immigrants more likely. Um, I feel like humor depends, I would say, on the family, but most likely they use humor to kind of deflect from the big issues and what's going on. Because my grandpa, he was a big funny guy, and we've had a lot of issues, with money and with family issues. And I feel like him being the one that just brought us all together and just made us laugh, kind of connected all of us again. And I feel like in the book, there are some moments that are funny and innocent, like when they're kids, like when Sofia, or it was Carla or something, like one of them broke their arms. Sophia, right? And she was looking at her, she was going to an art class, and her just climbing up and just breaking her arm. I think that to me is kind of funny. And just because of she broke her arm, she couldn't pursue that career. But I feel like those certain moments are funny because then you have other moments that are really serious. Or when, like it talks in the book, there's their own struggles with, with getting a job because they just came into New York. And then they went with Dr. Fleming to a restaurant. And I feel like putting in the story of his wife being drunk and kissing the father and then making ridicule of herself when the dancers come in. And then you have Sophia who uses that as a way to get a doll. I feel like that's pretty funny. And I feel like those moments, I feel like, are really funny. And it makes the story just kind of go along. It makes you appreciate, because I feel like every family does have those funny moments, whether you understand them or no or not. But I feel like that's what makes a family. And throughout the book, it's very notable that even though they have issues, they still appreciate one another, even if they don't really show it that much. But I feel like if you do understand them, I feel like with those moments, you're always gonna appreciate like the funny moments. And I feel like that's what they try to put in the novel. I feel like understanding those moments are very, I would say, very, very meaningful. And I feel like in a household, when it comes to immigrants, I feel like those funny moments are the ones that you remember the most. Because when you're all together, you always remember those moments and talk about them. So I feel like having very humorous moments is a very important part of being an immigrant, in my opinion. So that's kind of, I hope that's what she was also trying to put in the book.
I agree. Humor does help like hold the family together, and it really does reflect the complexities of the family dynamics that we have going on. Because on one hand, we have Papi who wants to protect his daughters and like protect him from becoming American, but at the same time, he knows that he cannot go back to like the Dominican Republic. Following up, which of the Garcia girls do you personally identify with the most?
Mm, I feel like Yolanda, to be honest, because in my family, boundaries aren't a thing, I would say. I feel like that's a lot in Latino families, boundaries, especially. And I feel like over the years, I've set more boundaries for myself. And I feel like I would say that they're very important. A lot of people don't really realize how important boundaries are or when you're setting boundaries. But I try to set boundaries with my family. But I feel like boundaries are a very good thing to have, especially in relationships, whether it's family, lovers, or even friends. Because over the years, especially these past 2 years, I've set a lot of boundaries, especially with COVID. Because I'm not a very like big, huggy and oh my god like person, but I've kind of set boundaries with my parents, with my friends, and I feel like a lot of people are okay. Well, now are okay with just shaking hands and all that, especially after COVID, and and then with my friends, I feel like they've taught me a lot about boundaries, especially with them, and having a lot of boundaries, and it helps you kind of have a better relationship with someone, because once you overstep someone's boundaries, you tend to have a fight, and then you get over it, but then you kind of understand why they're setting those boundaries. So I feel like that's why I really love with Yolanda, setting boundaries with a lot of people, whether it's gonna affect your relationship or not. I feel like that's very important to me. And then with the whole, also setting boundaries with her family, with her mom especially, I feel like that's also a lot big thing about me. And I feel like I relate more to her, but I do relate a lot with the other girls. Like with Sophia, I also do relate like the whole rebellion thing. I'm not super rebellious, but I feel like there are some moments where I'm like, but I'm not like her. It's like completely, but I feel like they're like overstepping boundaries. I'm kind of like her, but 100% I would say I'm more like Yolanda.
I definitely do see Osa Yolanda. And for the record, in case Mrs. Sanchez is watching this, I promise you your daughter is not rebellious. Okay, but personally, I had a little bit of a hard time identifying with the characters because obviously they're female and male, their experiences are wildly different. But the one girl that I did identify with a lot was Sandy, the second born, because she had a lot of identity issues that stems as well from what you said. Like she could not set boundaries, but unlike Yolanda, she failed at setting boundaries, and that led directly to most of the issues in her life. And I struggle setting boundaries, to be honest, and that's the main reason why I identify with Sandy a lot. And I think she's actually the one that broke her arm, not Sophia, now that I think about it.
Yeah, because I think one of her reasons why she had a breakdown was because she didn't have like a career or something like that, and it was due to her broken arm.
Broken
But it
arm.
was like years ago.
See.
But I mean, I feel like you have to pass through something to understand. Well, I need to set boundaries. So I feel like that happened to me a lot because when I was a kid, like a lot of people would take advantage of my kindness, and because I'm the type of person that says, "Well, I'm gonna trust you first. If you do anything, that's it." So I'm over kind of be like, oh, well, that's it. I feel like I need to set boundaries first because a lot of people don't really understand you at first, so you have to kind of explain. But
Now, do you think that the migration and subsequent assimilation drove a wedge between the family generations and between them? Or do you think it made them closer in a way?
I feel like it does make them closer because at the end of the day, they're leaving their home, they're leaving their traditions and who they are together, and I feel like that's why they call them the four girls because they're very close in my opinion. I feel like they're very close, and they understand each other because before like there's a part where the Sophia got weed and they all kind of had a plan to kind of smoke it together, but they forgot it at the end, and so the mom found it, and I feel like you can kind of understand how their bond is because at the end of the day when the mom found it and it talked to the girls, Sophia was the first to say, like I did it, don't blame my sisters, and they all kind of jumped in just so she wouldn't have either a harder time or just so she would have a punishment. At the end she did get a punishment, but I feel like you can see that bond that they were together because even after she went to the Dominican Republic, she kind of lost her identity and the sisters saw that and they got together to kind of help her sister get out of a situation that was bad for her, even though she didn't understand it. I think at the end she did understand it, but I feel like at first you're a teenager, like, it's my boyfriend, what's wrong with you? And stuff like that. And I feel like assimilating to a different country and different culture is very hard, but I feel like that made them closer because they're going through stuff together. They're not going through stuff separately. There are some stuff that they're going separately, but I feel like the big picture would be together. So I feel like, in my opinion, they left together, so I feel like they created a bigger bond.
That's a really good point of view. I personally thought that the dad was kind of estranged from the rest of his family, but I do see your point of view how like it made them closer because while Papi was acting more, I keep calling him Papi. While Carlos was acting more like cold towards his daughters, like in the end he truly cared about them, did everything he could for them, like even to the point of like literally going to a whole new country to keep them safe. So I appreciate you like changing my perspective on that. Um, just going a little bit more lighthearted here. What was your favorite part of the book overall?
I would say I feel like the most interesting because I was like, oh my god, what the when Carlos, who's the father, found like the love letters from Otto to Sophia, and it was like very explicit stuff and stuff like that because she went to Colombia for like a few days, and they just met and she already slept with him, and she came back and they had love letters, and I feel like it's so funny because he was like, well, I wasn't looking. I just saw them. I was looking for nail clips, and I was like, well, what the? It's like a scene from like a novela, and you're like, oh my god. And then it went from him finding the letters to him putting them on the table, and then I think he was like reading them. Like, why are you reading that? But okay. And then the sisters were like, oh my god. And then and then Sophia was like, what is wrong with you? And she started cursing. It was just like imagining that is like, whoa, that's so entertaining.
Really, I. Hmm, it's a really interesting thing to have a favorite, honestly.
I like drama.
Yeah.
I'm very chismosa.
It's okay, también yo. I personally like the whole, like you mentioned it earlier, when like I forget who Fifi is dating, like that guy in the Dominican Republic, but when the sisters all basically gang up on Mundine to entrap the other guy. I really just like how like the sisters did come together and were like, nah man, like, do you think that this journey overall from beginning to end broke their spirits or gave them something different altogether?
I feel like it depended. I feel like it depended on the sister for sure, because each story was different. All of them passed through stuff very difficult when they were kids, when they just came in. Like I feel like for Sophia, I understand why she became rebellious, like why she left her family, why all of this happened, and she she had her own struggles with just being rebellious. I would say I feel like her main struggle would be when they send her back to the Dominican Republic, and she changed a lot to kind of fit what they thought, or put it with what they thought a girl should be, and she kind of adapted to how women were treated there with very limited freedom, just freedom on paper, but not freedom in real life. And I feel like her struggle was with just falling in love with men and just kind of being very, I don't say open, but just being very free would be apart from that. And then you have Yolanda who has her own struggles with, her mom. I feel like that was her big issue. And then Carla, she had the worst. I think it was her, no, Carla, with the car and all that. Yeah, because there was like a
Yes,
guy.
yes,
And
yes.
Carla had her own. I feel like I would say that's part of her own mental breakdown, because she had to grow up, because she had to talk to police and with the whole situation with. To me, that part, I was just like, I need to go through this because I can't do. Yeah, just very perverted stuff. But I feel like these situations in the book are very real life, which is very sad, but it's very real life. And Carla, I feel like understanding what she went through kind of gave you feedback why she kind of, in a way, became a psychiatrist to kind of help others, because she couldn't think of her own words when explaining to the cops what happened. And I feel like that's a very big part of why she became a psychiatrist, to kind of help others in a way. And then Sandra, you have her own issue with her broken arm. I feel like she's not the most talked about.
She's ignored, which is ironic because she feels ignored. Sorry, I was away from that.
Yeah, I feel like we don't get a lot from her. You just get like a few stories here and there. But I feel like there is a reason why I would say you have those small stories, because I feel like her big story would be like she broke her arm, and that's why she's not an artist. So I feel like there's small stories that just kind of dive deep to kind of understand why they're at that moment.
It's interesting that you mentioned Sandy and the fact that they don't really mention her, because you're right. Like, well, there's some chapters that are focused on Sandy. It's never from her perspective. It's always like her parents talking about herself, and in that one chapter, se me fue la palabra, where she's basically going through the artist journey and then breaks her arm. She does state very clearly that she feels ignored, that she's the second daughter of the second family of whatever.
Like the middle child.
See, like the middle child. So her identity itself is very forgotten. Like she's very a wallflower, I'd say is the right word. And I think that's what breaks her when she finally comes over here and she sees her sisters doing well and she doesn't. Which does lead me to stating that the characters in this book are really really complicated. Like we have the CIA agent who was helping the girls escape while he was doing unspeakable things to little girls. We don't want to get canceled, but you can infer. Uh, that was my least favorite part of the book when they when we covered like what's going on in the Dominican Republic with the CIA agents. What was your least favorite part of the book?
Mine for sure was the whole car thing, because it was very explicit. It wasn't like very brief. Oh, this is what's happening. Like it went into depth, into very illustrated things. But I understand why she did it that way, just so you can. Because one thing is just to say, oh, there's a pervert, and then there's a different thing to say what he's doing, and then that's like when you understand. Well, that's very hard, and very very hard for a child to kind of, because she didn't understand what was going on. So I feel like when she became older, understanding what happened to her is very because like I feel like when stuff like that happens to you as a kid, you don't understand what's going on, but after years, you kind of get more understanding of it, and you kind of have to deal with it over and over again until you kind of have the big picture, which I think is very sad. But I feel like, which is very sad, is also the fact that it does happen in real life. So I feel like these stories are very realistic, so it makes you kind of, I feel like in my opinion, it makes you love the book more.
Honestly, yes. And as a male, I have not experienced that. And this really gave me an appreciation for the horrible things that girls and women go through. And I'm really sorry like, that that happens, you know.
Yeah.
It was really harrowing for me to read that part. It was just, Alvarez just wanted to make us suffer. And, you know, in a good way, you know, because these are issues that need to be talked about, especially in immigrant communities where talking about sex is a taboo, which might have been one of the reasons why Carla didn't understand what's going on. Um, but you know, fortunately, she grew stronger out of it. Like you mentioned, that probably was the seed for her becoming a psychiatrist to help others. But I really don't know how I'm gonna segue into the next question.
Well, I feel like writing about women in Latino families is, you can add so much, because there's a lot of issues that do happen with Latino family. A lot of um like stuff like with perverts and stuff like that. It does happen a lot in Latino families, which is very sad. And I've heard a bunch of stories, and I feel like adding it and bringing light to it is very important, because like as a man, if you read it, you understand more what women go through, what kids go through, what it is to feel that way, what it is to feel very scared and very emotional and not know what to do, because you also tense up, and you kind of, you don't really react. You would say, we'll just, if you have pepper spray, we'll just spray him. It's like, no, well, you're scared, you're tense, your body doesn't move. And I feel like it also explains that in the first story, how she feels that way. And I feel like those moments are very important for society as well. If people read this book, even if they read one part, they do get an understanding what's going on in the real world.
Honestly, yes. And to any male audience out there, you know, please read this book. It'll give you a good perspective on the horrors that women face every day, unfortunately. Uh, Now, do you think that the girls felt some sort of shame towards their roots, or do you think they were proud of them?
I feel like at the end, they, like Yolanda, she got back with her roots. She went back to the Dominican. At a certain point, they all do go back to their roots. But I feel like the reason why they call it how the Garcia girls lost their accent is because, like, I would say in like Yolanda and Sofia, they, like in America, you do get a lot more rights in other countries. A lot of countries have the same rights, of course, but I feel like when women have voices, I feel like it's very outspoken in the U.S. compared to the Dominican Republic, and I feel like one part of how they lose their accent is exploring that, like creating boundaries, speaking up for themselves, having their own set of values compared to like their parents, and reading books about feminism and going to college and finishing college, because there's like a part where like they take out one of like their cousins so she can get married, because education is not seen as how women should act, or how women should be, because it's not a good quality for marriage. So I feel like one part of losing their accent would be about finding themselves and being outspoken, because that's not very, I would say, Dominican Republican during that time at least. And I feel like that's a part where they lose their accent and they kind of go back into the American part. But I feel like because they're parents, I feel like they do want them to still have. I feel like every family wants them to have their Latino roots. But in the end, I feel like they do embrace certain parts. But I feel like Sophia did lose a lot of hers, because she married a German man, even though he was very well off and very smart.
Very good source.
She kind of bragged that she had white children. And I feel like she lost a lot of her own accent. And then I feel like Yolanda's the one that really wanted to go back to her roots. So I feel like it depending on the girls, and I think that's why it's called losing their accent, because they kind of lose certain parts of their Latino parts. But I feel like it depended on them if they wanted to go back to it.
And that really does propose a very complicated dilemma for the girls, like whether they retain their accents and remain connected to the roots, but lead a hard life in the U.S., or lose the accent, but in turn lose connection to who they used to be. Um, you did mention earlier something about education, which really did pique my interest, because when they're in the island, before they go to the U.S., they do mention that women don't go to university because education is really not valued in women. But when they go to the US, their father, or their parents, I should say, push them to go get higher education. How does education play a role in immigration, in your opinion?
I feel like times have changed for sure, because I feel like we're talking about a book that's like from the 1960s, and during those times, women were seen as people who just needed to tend the house and have children, and that's why their best option was just to get married to someone who had a job and they would get maintained. I feel like that's why a few immigrants, at least during those times, push women to get married, because that's how they grew up. They see, oh, men are the ones who make the money and you're going to be taken care of. But I feel like now, and I feel like it was like 1970s around that time, that's when they asked them to, that's when they have careers and all that. Because I feel like once you get out of your own country, the only way that you can maintain yourself is with a job. So I feel like them telling them, oh, you need an education, because they don't really know anyone here. They don't know what's going on here. I feel like that's a big part of why they wanted them to be educated, because they don't know what's going on here. They don't know the values, because it's different American values and Latino values. So they don't really know a lot about America, because there's not a lot of technology back then. You can't really see what's going on the TV. So I feel like in my opinion, I feel like that's why they wanted to push more education on them, to be like, oh, well, you need your own career first, and then if you get married, well, you get married. But I feel like in today's time, it's like you can't really live off someone's salary, and if you do, it's like just yours. It's like you can't really live a two people lifestyle with one salary, unless they get paid like very well. But I feel like now you need to have your own career. I feel like today's time you really need to go to college to be successful. It's very rare that you're kind of in that way, but most people do try to get educated, at least in some form, because I feel like jobs now do require a lot of education. For very little pay in some areas. But I mean, I feel like now it's different times where you can just have social media jobs, or any other type of jobs that don't really need a high school degree or anything like that, and they do get paid very well. So I feel like today's time is very complicated in my opinion, because you don't know who gets paid more. Because sometimes people who aren't educated find a way to be successful, which is very, very, very good. Because I feel like a lot of people's school isn't their thing, and then there's other people who school or something. So I feel like it depends on who you are, in my opinion.
Pretty much, I agree. And speaking of pay, when they're in the Dominican Republic, it's heavily implied, if not straight up shown, that the girls belong to an extremely rich family. And when they move to the US, pues, they're like the rest of us, they got nothing. Do you think that this loss of wealth and class status impacted the family as a whole? And if so, how?
I feel like money can change someone's perspective a lot. I, f- I always, in my opinion, I feel like being middle class is the best class, because I feel like um, you're well off, and you're like very nice. You're in the right moment. You're not very spoiled, but you're not very poor. You're not low income, and I feel like having being from low income, because I've had struggles with that, because I when I was a kid I was low income, and then went to the middle class, and then I had those also imbalances because my dad, he was middle class while my mom was low income, and I feel like I learned a lot with that, because being low income, it gives you a lot of struggles, but it makes you understand how much money is worth, and how much savings can help, and how much and how much the little moments count. And I feel like the middle class, you kind of forget how important certain issues are, and how important I would say a lot of issues are compared to the low income, because you don't really worry about that. While low income, you do worry about a lot of other stuff. And I feel like if they were to be rich or have certain money, I feel like their struggles wouldn't be the same. Like probably Carla wouldn't um, have to deal with what she dealt with. Like because if she was probably in a better neighborhood, it wouldn't be as probable that she went through something something like that, or how the dad, or how like they had the whole dinner thing, that probably wouldn't happen. So I feel like a lot of the struggles wouldn't even be there, and I feel like they would be different people. I feel like they would be a little bit more spoiled, in my opinion. But I feel like struggles wouldn't be there. I feel like struggles make you better, in my
Honestly,
opinion.
honestly, I do believe that there's a lot of lessons in struggles. And I do believe that because of the fact that they were so wealthy and so affluent in the Dominican Republic, that's the only reason they were able to go to the US, because they had the money to do so. And towards the end of the book, we learned that the dad, Carlos, like eventually got another job as a doctor. And fortunately, they're the outlier for the immigrant experience. They were able to become rich again over decades, but
Mm-hmm.
at the beginning, it surely was hard. Must be nice. I'm just kidding.
I feel like today's time, a lot of immigrants, they always come low income, of course, and I feel like once they kind of depend on their kids at one point. That's why they kind of go, oh, you have to educate yourself, because at a certain point they become middle class because of their children rather than themselves. It's very hard because it's like you're coming from a different country. No, you basically have nothing, so it's very hard to get a better job. And from the stories that I've seen, most of the parents kind of either get educated very once their kids like are out of college, and they have that moment to be like, oh well, I can get educated. So I feel like it becomes more at the end of the story, just like how. But I feel like they got a better start than others. But I feel like it's the same base. I feel like at the end you kind of become middle class.
See, it's it's really interesting. Like honestly, I can't identify to their island life because both my familia is in Mexico, but it must be really nice to have like an hacienda with like all those like, houses. Like oh my god. Now, since we are talking about their struggles, how does the language barrier impact them as a family?
Mhm. I feel like they used it as secrets to like the English, because they're like, oh well, we can't speak in front of the children, because I feel like that also happened with me, because my parents would say stuff and they were saying it in English. Well, my dad and stuff like that, because he was like, well, because we're, to be honest, children aren't the best secret keepers, so that's why I feel like that's why they spoke English. But I feel like in the U.S. it's very common to have a lot of racism in certain areas. I feel like in El Paso we're very we're not as racist towards Mexicans because we're all Mexican, or at least Latino. So I feel like we don't get to see a lot of racism, but when it comes to other areas, especially in Texas and other areas, you do get a lot of racism, and it makes you kind of understand how people kind of see you in a way. But I feel like it depends on how you talk about it, because I feel like as a parent, you do have to talk about racism to your kids and kind of make them understand that, well, that they don't have to be ashamed of it, because you do get a lot of kids that are ashamed of their language, and they start not to speak their native language, and they kind of become more American, you would say. And I've had a few friends when I was in high school tell me about how they regret not being um, not being so much in their roots, because I feel like at the end they do want to be back in their roots. They do want to speak, because I feel like a lot of parents also have the issue of, should we teach our kid our native language or should they just assimilate? And then got a friend who her mom didn't teach him any Spanish and didn't really teach him a lot about their own culture, and it does come with resentment, because he was also like saying he had told me that he felt a little resentment over his mom, because he does want to learn, and it makes it, and as an adult it is harder to learn a language. So I feel like I would say, in my opinion, I feel like you should always teach your kids where you came from. You should always teach your kids your native language, everything you can, and then after they're adults, they can make their own decision whether they want to continue it or not. I think that is a better issue, because they're making their own decisions. You're not making it for them. And I feel like in the book, they still, in a way, they do try to leave their culture, leave all of that at a certain point, but at the end they do go back to it. So I feel like that's a very big moment. And I feel like, in my opinion, I feel like it's better to be in your own culture and be with your roots, because like I'm Mexican American and I love being Mexican. I love the food, I love the language, and I used to go to school in Juarez. I used to do all of that, and I remember in high school, there's this girl who was from Mexico, and she was like, "Well, I don't believe Mexican Americans are actual Mexicans," and I was like, "Well, that's not true. I am Mexican, even though I wasn't born in Mexico. Like, you don't have to be born in Mexico to be Mexican." I feel like it comes with, you are Mexican whether a lot of people like it or not. You are Mexican. You have those roots, but I feel like embracing them is different. So I feel like I embrace my Mexican heritage. I love being Mexican. I always go to Mexico everywhere. I love it. So I'm a Mexican. I'm a proud Mexican.
También yo, me too. And speaking of which, I would say that this is not only a very good immigrant piece of literature, but it's also good Chicano literature to read, because it also does delve into the Chicano identity of being proud of where you came from while you're here in the US making a life for yourself. So, to any Chicano studies teachers out there, and any teachers out there in general, I really recommend teaching this in class to explore identity. Which I do need to point out that this book is loosely based on Alvarez's life. Um, would you like to meet her in real life?
I would. I feel like we would have very deep conversations. So I feel like I have the pleasure. I'll bring my book so she can sign it. And then I feel like I would have a conversation with her about, I feel like identities throughout the book is a very big issue, and I feel like I would like to kind of talk to her about it and how she felt, because I've had the same struggles, but I feel like now I'm a little bit better about my own identity, but I would love to talk with her about that. So.
Honestly, and Miss Alvarez, if you're watching this, even though there's a low chance, we want to thank you for writing this book as well. And let's see if I have any last questions. No, actually, you answered most of my questions for today. I do have one final question for you, Miss Natalia. We did ask you to join us for today's session in our awesome show, Long Story Short. Don't forget to follow us. Um, not that I'm accusing you, but what piqued your interest in being part of our project?
Um, because I worked with you guys and I loved reading books and kind of exploring what what it really meant. Because last year that I was with you guys, I feel like I explored a lot about my own. I feel like books really help you understand yourself, but also understand your values and all of that. And I feel like reading a lot of books kind of broadens your aspects into a lot of different things. So I feel like reading a book, I don't really read books. In my career, it's just about designing and understanding a building rather than people. Well, you do have to understand people, right? But not go too deep into who they are as someone. And I feel like books do that for you. And I feel like books to me, especially like books like these, are very interesting. So I was very excited because I didn't know anything about this book. So I was very excited when you guys when I heard that you guys were doing a podcast. So I was like, oh, why not? Let me join to see what's going on. And I was very excited, to be honest, to be here. So I was very nervous, but it was fun.
Honestly, it has been fun, and we're really honored to have you here. And again, we want to extend you a huge congratulations for your graduation this past semester. It's like, no, it's okay, I hit it all the time.
Woo!
But again, congratulations, and we wish you well in your endeavors at Texas Tech.
Thank you.
Don't forget about us if you design the next building. We'll have your Nathalia Sanchez building up there. And for you at home watching this, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And don't forget to hit the bell icon for when we upload a new video. And thank you for watching. This was Long Story Short. Take care.
Bye.